Hey there, welcome to Be Unmessable with the podcast. I am your host, Josselyne Herman-Saccio, and today we have an interesting guest, somewhat of an ironic guest. Her name is Jessica Rhodes, and she founded a company called Interview Connections in 2013, and it's a podcast booking agency. 2013 was before anything of its kind existed, and she is the world's first and leading podcast booking agency. Interview Connections has booked over 30,000 podcast interviews for more than 800 clients. She is so passionate about helping entrepreneurs grow their business through genuine human to human connection. And the podcast interviews that Jessica and her team have booked have helped generate millions of dollars, sold thousands of books, and transformed countless lives. I'm so thrilled to have Jessica here with us. So please welcome Jessica Rhodes.
Hi, Jocelyn. Thanks so much for having me. I'm super excited.
I'm so happy to have you. And I didn't realize when I booked you that we had worked together before. So even better to re-see
Yes,
you. Yes.
absolutely. Yeah, I was in your course in 2018 and it just had such a significant there's so many moments in my life where I hear your voice.
I don't know if that's good or bad, but as long as it's me saying game on or something like that, that's good news then, I suppose.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your journey because, to open up this agency in 2013 before this was a thing, right? In terms
Mhm.
of booking people on podcasts, tell us about how you ended up doing that because it wasn't exactly something that people would go to school for or intend to do like when they're little. Let me be a
Yeah.
podcast booker.
Exactly. And it's so funny to look back on life and realize like certain decisions did kind of manifest things that you didn't predict because I actually did get my degree in communications and organizational leadership. I went to Temple University. So I technically have a degree in a relevant field, but I had no idea that this was the direction I was going in. I was actually working for an environmental nonprofit for many years doing door to door canvassing and through college and then into my early 20s. And it was when I was pregnant with my first child that I just had that flip of a switch of I can't do this anymore. I want to be home and I'm not
Mm,
really sure what like what it's going to look like to have a job at home or work different hours so I could be home with my baby. But my dad is an entrepreneur. He's a business coach. He had a newsletter marketing company for a long time. He says, Jess, you should be a virtual assistant. You can have your own business. You can work from home online. And he says, I'll be your first client.
oh.
And so I was like, sure, dad. He goes, you actually have to do a good job. Like, he's not about handouts. He's like, read all of my books, take all of my courses, like, listen into my mastermind coaching calls, learn. And if it's going well, I'll keep you on. I'm like, okay. And one of the things that he asked me to do for him was to book him as a guest on podcasts. He had already been being a guest on podcasts, having his own podcast. And it was such a great way for him to connect with new clients without having to travel and go to conferences and seminars and do the whole in-person networking thing. And so I was like, sure. So I took all my door-to-door canvassing skills and just applied it to emailing podcast hosts and telling them about this great guest that I had, and that really sparked something because nobody was offering that service before. So every host that I reached out to, now everyone wants to be on podcasts, people are always pitching. But in 2013, I would send an email to a podcast host recommending my dad as a guest, and they were like, oh my gosh, nobody's ever pitched me before. Like, who are you? So that's what sparked this whole idea of like, wow, I think that there's enough interest and enough demand and a wide space where nobody's doing this. And so I started Interview Connections and really created this new type of PR company because PR companies weren't booking on podcasts and they have a different model than we do,
Yeah.
which is guaranteed placements for a flat fee.
Amazing, amazing. And it's funny because when I first started being a guest on before I launched my podcast, I had my VA reaching out and she did a great job. I mean, I got on like almost 100 podcasts from her just reaching out and I thought, who's going to want to talk? But there's millions of podcasts. They need guests. It's crazy.
Literally, there are over
Oh,
3 million podcasts. When I started, there were maybe a couple 100,000. It's
that's nuts.
absolutely skyrocketed in the last decade.
Yeah, that is crazy. So obviously your email pitch worked because you're on this podcast. So that didn't take much. But tell us a little bit about a situation in your life, because you know that given we've worked together, but also you've listened to a couple of episodes of the show, and the theme is being unmessable with, which is not about being tough. It's not about being unfeeling. It's about being able to stay in that space of vision and creation without getting knocked down for the count or hooked into a space of reaction. So, if there was a situation in your life that you could describe that was reaction bait or could have taken you out for the count, but didn't because you were able to transcend it, give us an example of something like that. I know people that are successful in life have many examples, but what comes to mind?
It's funny because something literally just happened this morning where, we accidentally texted our list at like 6 in the morning, which is obviously not an intentional time to text, but I was like, of course, this is going to happen on the day that I'm on the Unmessable with podcast because I couldn't let that mess me up. But, the big thing when I saw when your podcast came out and I watched some of the episodes, it wasn't just like, oh, I want to be on Josselyne's show because I love Josselyne. That is true. But it was also that I have this story of being unmessable with. And I'm like, this is the podcast I want to share this
Oh,
story on.
perfect.
So,
Tell us. Yes.
yeah. So, like I said, I started the company in 2013 and grew it for many, many years. This is not the time to share the whole business story, but let's
But
fast
still, a
forward.
decade to be in business for a decade is a accomplishment. Most businesses don't last that long.
Yeah. And I had the great fortune of every year was better than the last. Every year was better than the last. For the first several years, it was double revenue, double that, like grow, grow, grow. And we were growing in a way that in hindsight, I see was not sustainable. Like it
Mm,
was hustle, 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 work really hard, go, go, go. Like we had a record breaking almost $600,000 month a couple of years ago, like in December 2021. And it felt so good to meet the goal. But I look back, I'm like, that was freaking hard. Like it felt great to meet the goal, but at the same time, I'm like, I can't keep up at this pace in this way. And so we were growing, growing, growing. And then in 2022, about April, May, we had been doing our podcast guesting masterclass, like a 9 straight day workshop. It was absolutely a hustle and a grind. And I was feeling so burnt out. I'm like, we
yeah.
just need to change our strategy. And so, really, out of burnout, I was like, let's stop the masterclass. Like, we're running ads, I'm live every day, dozens and dozens of calls, just not being led and operated in an efficient, sustainable way. And so we switched the strategy and we booked all these conferences. We're going to go back to conferences, get trade show booths, and signed all of these contracts for multiple conferences and literally turned off the spigot of leads that were coming in for our online masterclass. And a few months into this whole conference plan, the leads dried up, the sales were down, and the conferences were not generating the sales that I predicted that they might. And I was in total freeze mode, like total,
Hmm.
oh my God, what did I do? Like, I don't know how to make it go back because this masterclass was it's such a beast. You have the agency running ads, there's funnels, there's systems, there's all this stuff. And I'm like, I can't just change it overnight. I've already signed contracts for these conferences. Like, even when I tell the story, I feel the
You
feelings
get
in
the
my
physical
body.
reaction. I get
I'm
it.
getting
It
like the
is. It's
physical reaction.
it's like PTSD. I totally can relate. I understand.
Yeah, and it was so it was so scary. And so then we did there were so many moments, there were so many integrity restoration conversations that had to happen in that time because I have a business partner, Margie. We both did Landmark together.
Mhm.
And so there was just this moment of like, okay, she was like, girl, like what is going on? Like I trusted you to make the decision that was going to lead to the sales, and that is like totally not happening. And so we got the master classes back on the calendar. Like we had to make these big pivots. I mean, some of the conference contracts we signed, I mean, we just lost out on $12,000. Like we just had to
Eat
eat
it.
it
Yeah.
to get back to where we had to be. And so we got the master classes back on the calendar, but then there was this opportunity of like, okay, how do we want to run these master classes in a way that works for us. So we made it 3 days, not 9. Like we got really strategic with how we're qualifying the leads and how we're messaging and everything. And so now we do the master class almost every month, but I love it. Like we have one this week and it's like, I love it. It's not a burnout. And then I've learned since that burning out is not because of how many hours you're working, but it's really about how you feel about the work that you're doing. And so changing how I feel about it and doing it in a way that's more sustainable has made it so great. But that mistake, that choice that didn't get course corrected quite soon enough led to years of like revenue destruction, like sales down, because we had all these payment plans that were kind of keeping us afloat, but then they ended and we hadn't signed up enough new clients yet.
Right.
And so we were in like our business line of credit was so frighteningly close to the maximum. And the bank is like, you don't get more credit because you haven't closed enough sales. Like we give you credit so you can make investments. And there were just so many scary moments. And there were so many times where I was just like, get me the F out of this business.
Yeah.
Like I can't, but that wasn't actually a choice, because it is a choice. I could have said,
Absolutely, you could have. People do all the time. So what had you stay with it, and what brought you to the other side of it? Because I can hear the impact of the quote unquote mistake. I don't know if I would call it a mistake. It's like whatever whatever you did, results are a function of action or inaction, right? Whatever you did or didn't do resulted in that. But then what was it that enabled you to not say F it? Because many people would have been like, you know what, forget it. This is not worth the stress. It is not worth the craziness.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. I like that it's not a mistake because it was like, a choice that was made. There was an impact, and the rest is a story. But it was really the vision, the big picture. Who I am is not somebody that quits when it gets hard. And it
Mhm.
got really hard and it was so tempting. But when the reality set in of if I wanted to, I could light this match, set it on fire and say we're shutting this down. That was a choice and it was never one that I would have actually made because I've come this far. This was 2022. I had been in business since 2013 at that point. What am I got this far to say I'm done when it got really hard? Like, no. Like, we are going to put on our big girl panties and we're going to figure this out. We're going to get things back on track. I had been so fortunate to have never had a down year at that point. Literally every year prior was bigger than the last. And I'm like, this is my training ground.
Yeah.
Like, I have to learn how to get through a difficult time. And now that we're back on track and we're having good months, I am so grateful for the success now. I didn't have that same gratitude before. I took it for granted because it was just expected. And now when we have a great sales month, I'm like, yes, yes, yes.
Celebrating. So I can hear a couple things in what you're saying. Tell me if I'm capturing what you're saying accurately. So one of the things that kept you going was your vision of yourself, of being someone who doesn't give up, right? But I would assert, tell me if I'm off, that there was also some vision for the company, like some impact that you were out to make that pulled you through. It wasn't just about the money and making money, not making money, because that's all just whatever. That's like the stock market, it goes up, it
Mhm.
goes down. But what is it about your vision for people or for the services that you provide that was bigger than the numbers?
Yeah, I'm so glad that you asked that because that was the other piece of it is, the clients that we were working with and that we continue to work with and their success stories. And that was always a reminder of, oh, we're here for so much more than the sales and the money. All the money is a byproduct of the value that we create for our clients and in our businesses. And as I would talk to clients and see the growth that they were experiencing, seeing the personal growth they were experiencing, seeing the lives that they were impacting through their message getting out there. And then our team too, in this same time of things being incredibly challenging, our team was implementing the Scrum and agility methodology. They implemented a 4-day work week. Like we're increasing the, pay of our team. Like all of these great things were happening amidst the incredible stress and chaos of the sales side of things. And
Yeah.
so as things got really beautiful on the service delivery side of things, and as clients that we were signing up were seeing success, as I'm like, okay, there's a much bigger vision here for Interview Connections than just having her ego feel better for some decisions that went, had an impact that we didn't think we're going to have. So it was really seeing the big picture of like what this company is having on the world that kept me going.
Yeah, and I think that's so important for people that are listening because everybody runs into tough times, in business, whether it takes a few years or not. It's easy, it's predictable that you're going to have down months or down years. So the question is, okay, so what is the point? Like, why are you even in this business? That's what people get disconnected from when they start failing at the measures. And,
Mm-hmm.
people get focused on the measures rather than the game. And you can't play basketball, as you've heard me say so many years ago. You can't play basketball with your eye on the scoreboard. You can look at the
Yeah,
scoreboard, during the timeouts or whatever. But you can't go down the court dribbling with your eye on the scoreboard because you'll never win the game. You got to keep your eye on what is the vision, what is the why behind what you're doing, because that every time will revivify your passion. So when you said it isn't so much about, I can't remember exactly what you said, but it's about how I feel about, it isn't about working however many hours, it's how I feel about the work that I do. I would say that's completely related to having the vision be the overarching context rather than the content of what you're doing. But I don't recommend working so much, though.
yeah,
I do think at some point that trading dollars for hours is unsustainable. And I run into it with almost every CEO that I coach, every founder that I coach. The thing that they end up is like in a prison of their own company that they created.
totally. And I love that you brought the basketball analogy. It's so funny. Just for as we're recording this, the Olympics are happening, and on Saturday night, we're watching the track and field games. And I'm saying it's like Saturday night at 9 o'clock, and I'm saying to my sister and brother who were here, I'm like, "Do you notice how the person in the front? She is not turning around to see what's behind her. She's not checking, and that is a metaphor for success." And they were like, just give it a rest. It's
Just
nine
chill
o'clock on
out,
a
have a
Saturday."
glass of wine, relax. Yeah.
But I'm
But you're
like, I
speaking my
see it.
language. You're speaking my language.
And it's so true because it is so important and in all of this, I have managed to work less, like in because the sales team that we had at the time, they have all exited the company through this process, and in it we've rebuilt a team. We brought on some virtual assistants to help us with stuff that we didn't need full-time in-house employees to do. And so now with these launches that we run, before it was like 12-hour days, weekends, like that was just it. And now I have this great team. They're so grateful for the work. They're doing all the, all this back end admin work that I don't
Yep.
have to do. And it's great. Like I feel good about it. I'm not having to work like crazy long hours. It's a little bit more during a launch, but it's not anything that is super stressful. And it's like it's exciting and it feels good.
That's so great. And you have more than one child now, right?
Yes, I have two now. Mm-hmm.
Two. Okay. So you have more time to spend with those precious ones.
Yes, and they're both competitive athletes. My daughter does all-star cheer and she's doing the travel team. They're both now on travel competitive teams. My son's a soccer player, so it's getting busy and very exciting around here.
That's great. I love that you have designed it in a way that you can be with them as well. As you know, I have three kids. And so, when I left Landmark a few years ago, it was the opportunity for me to design what did I want my life to look like. And I, like you, were like, okay, I don't want to work on Fridays and Saturdays and Sundays, which I've worked on for 30 years, every Friday,
Yeah.
Saturday, and Sunday for, however many years. So I work, 3.5 days a week. It's like 15 to 20 hours max a week, and it's just been like a delight to design your work life. And I think that's the biggest thing for entrepreneurs that are listening is if you start to get burnt out, like Jessica talked about, what are you not designing? What are you at the effect of? You're reacting to what's coming at you, whether it's lots of leads or no leads, and not designing from your vision. And that's really, I'd love for people to take away from this that really worked for you clearly,
Yeah.
when you pivoted over to that. Is there anything else that
Mhm.
you want to leave people with in terms of like one thing they could do today if they want to get on podcasts? Like, what would be something that they should do?
Yeah, well, one thing that just came to mind that was a through line of this whole journey and is relevant to getting visibility too is I really had tools to regulate my nervous system through all this, because when you go through those tough times, you
Hmm.
go into stress responses, trauma responses, you're freezing, you're flighting, you're fawning, you're fighting, and it really makes it difficult to move forward. And so I got back into tools that help me to regulate my nervous system, saunas, cold plunges, tapping, breath work. And then I just really had to push myself back out on podcasts, because in
Yeah.
this whole time of difficulty in 2022 and 2023, I also wasn't out there being a guest on podcasts. And so that also had a negative impact, because I wasn't walking my walk. I'm like selling this service that I'm afraid to do because I'm in all of this stress. And so it was this combination of, regulating my nervous system, cleaning everything up, and then getting myself back out there on 3 to 4 podcasts every month, and regulating and breathing and calming down so I can be totally present. And so for people that want to, be speaking on podcasts and be visible, get yourself into a nice grounded place, because it can be scary to the nervous system to be visible and to put yourself out there and share these stories. But when you are in a regulated place and you connect to that big vision, like the thing that I'm most grateful for in all this is that this story could help other people and see
Right.
that, okay, if I can get through multiple years of like incredible financial stress in this company with like over a dozen employees, like you can get through it too. So, just sometimes you need to kind of push yourself outside your comfort zone. And then once you're outside your comfort zone, it becomes comfortable because it becomes known.
And talk about the cost of not being visible to a company, because I don't think people really think about that. I know I work with a lot of people who are afraid to be in the limelight or whatever, but what is it costing companies not to be in the limelight? Whatever
Yeah,
the
I mean,
limelight is. I don't know what that is, but
right. Well, I can tell you, from my personal experience of not being visible for those years, and we were still running our ads and whatnot. So we had some leads coming in, but because I wasn't being visible and I wasn't being visible organically on podcasts, on social media with my email list, when I started getting on podcasts again, people that I had known for years and have been kind of friends of the company for years were like, "Where did you go? Are you still doing
Mm,
podcast booking?" And that was scary to realize, oh my gosh, people that the cost is that people might question if you're in business. They might
or
question if you're still
alive.
doing or alive. I mean, seriously, it becomes very detrimental to your ability to grow. You have to stay visible so that people have you top of mind when they need you, or when somebody they know needs you. So it
Mm,
can really just damage your reputation or just take you out of the game, because out of sight, out of
amazing. Yeah.
mind.
Yeah, it's true. And then conversely, I guess if you think the role that visibility plays in growth, it seems logical it would just be insight in mind. But is there anything else that's deeper than that?
Yeah. I mean, when you're not visible too, I realized that my creativity juices totally dried up. I had no idea what to talk about. I was like, part of the burnout too is because I had turned off all the creativity juices. I wasn't being interviewed.
Yeah.
I was like, I've said everything there is to say about podcasting. Like, I was like, what else is there to say? Go listen to 10 years of content. But then when I started doing it again, I'm like, oh, I think about all these different angles that I could talk about it, and realize that
Hmm.
people are finding me for the first time. I do need to continue talking about the benefits and the whys and the hows. And when you feel motivated and inspired and you're not burnt out, you're happy to keep talking about the stuff that your audience needs to hear when they find you for the first time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it really got my content juices flowing in a big way. Whereas before I was like, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to post. I'm out of ideas.
Yes. It's not real, not real, but that's fine. That's, how we get
Exactly.
when we're in those reactive modes and sort of dealing with what life's throwing at us versus what we're creating. So, I love what you're saying about that, and it's almost like I reckon it. I reckon it. What am I like from like Georgia now? I don't know, but I liken it to. I don't even know what that means, but it's something like going to the gym. It's like I don't want to go. I don't want to go. I don't. But once I go, it all starts flowing. So I think it's the same thing with being visible. It's like I don't want to. I don't want to. I don't want to. But then although I never say I don't want to because I love being with people and speaking
Yeah.
and doing interviews and all that kind of stuff. But I have clients that are like, I'm afraid and what am I going to say and have imposter syndrome and who am I and da da da. And it's once they start, it's like, oh my gosh, how did I not do this for that long? Like I've got to keep it's the adrenaline and the all the dopamine that starts hitting.
Yes, yeah, and I love your analogies too because that is the primary reason I hired a personal trainer. Every Monday
Yes,
at 6:30 in the morning, I drive myself there and she tells me what to do and I do it. Like I wouldn't do it if it were up to me. I just know that. I know it's important. I know what to do, but I won't do it. And
yeah,
so knowing what you need to get yourself to do. I mean, that's why we offer podcast booking as a service because people know they know they should do it. They know how to send a pitch. They know how to research, how to do it. You know how to Google. Like you could do this. But if
exactly.
you're not doing it, then you've got to delegate it. Get someone else to force you onto the show.
And even though you know how to do it doesn't mean you should be doing it. That might not be the best
Exactly.
use of your time. If you can have somebody, a service like you
Mhm.
or an assistant or anybody do it other than you, there are things that you should not be doing it even though you can. Like I feel that
Exactly.
way about laundry. I should not be doing laundry. I might be able to, but why should I be doing laundry? There's someone else who can do this laundry.
Exactly.
All right. So I know you have a gift for our listeners. You want to talk a little bit about that? And I'll make sure that it's in the show notes and
Yeah,
everywhere.
absolutely. Well, so we talked all about our podcast guesting masterclass. So I would love for folks to come to that. It's interviewconnections.com/live masterclass. And as a gift, I don't think I told you about this before, but I have this ultimate podcast interview prep checklist. It's 4 pages. It's super comprehensive. It has like everything that I do before, during, and after an interview. And we also got a bunch of input from our clients. So if you would like that, just personally email me, Jessica at interviewconnections.com, and I'll just email the attachment right back to you because I would love for you to have that so you come prepared to all of your interviews and you really maximize the experience of those interviews.
Perfect. So we'll have the link to the masterclass and your email in the show notes so people can get to you whichever way and both ways or all ways. And I just am so appreciative that you came on the show. I know for myself when I was doing all these podcast interviews, at some point I was like, yeah, but what about the host? I want to know more about them, but it's really not a venue for me to ask them questions. And that's why I said I'm going to do my own podcast so I can have people on and find out about them. So I'm just thrilled
Yeah.
that you're one of the people and you're welcome back anytime, Jessica.
Thank you so much. This was such a beautiful opportunity to share this whole story. And thank you so much for everything, all of the coaching you've given me, through Landmark and just this experience. I appreciate you.
Well, it's completely my honor, and I'm sure we'll be connected in the future as well as the past. And for those of you listening, if you got value out of today, please rate and review the episode. That would make a big difference. But most importantly, share it with anybody you think would get value out of this conversation. And I know that there are a lot of people that would get value out of this. So please share it with your networks of people. And we'll see you on the next episode of Be Unmessable with the podcast. Thanks for joining me in this episode of Be Unmessable with the podcast. And as you know, I always like to make sure that you got value out of being with me. So I am offering you an additional free gift, which is how to have an unmessable with day. I have put together a checklist of 5 daily practices that you can begin to exercise the muscle of being unmessable with if you do these 5 things every day. So click in the show notes and make sure you download this free checklist of the basics of being unmessable with 5 daily practices. We'll see you on the next episode. And please, if you can take a moment and just rate and review the episode, it makes a huge difference on all the podcast platforms. So if you could do that, I would deeply appreciate it. All right. See you on the next one.